Hi, everybody. It's Tom here. Hoping, Tim will be joining me soon. We've gone a little bit early this evening because there are wild rumours circulating in Fleet Street that there is going to be one of these late night announcements at 8 p.m. this evening. I got to say, these rumors come, these rumors go. The last one we had was last week on Friday, when it was meant to be coming at 6. It didn't then come till 7, but when it came, my God, was it a huge announcement saying that Andrew had lost his Duke of York title. Well, as we all know, he didn't actually lose it. He just agreed to stop using it. I'm really working on trying to stop saying and ah. So let me know how I'm doing. So even if the announcement at 8 p.m. doesn't happen today in 3 minutes' time, what I think it shows you is the feverish sense of expectation that something really, really needs to be done about this Andrew problem. There's a really interesting story in the Telegraph today, just dropped about 5 o'clock this evening, which had a extraordinary, what seemed like a briefing note in it, saying that William wants, the Prince of Wales has little time for his uncle, has made it known he wants the Royal Lodge issue settled before he comes king. Now, that felt to me very like a kind of semi-briefing that this could indeed be settled before William becomes king and could be settled sooner than we'd expected. I'm sorry, I just need to sort my background out. Forgive me. Look, this is terrible. Laundry drying on the radiator. Disgraceful. You wouldn't find that happening at Royal Lodge, I can tell you. So my hunch is that if anything does happen, I did briefly wonder whether it was the king had been hospitalized. I didn't think he looked particularly well over the last few days. He is flying home with the UK press corps. So that might be another reason, if there is going to be a statement, why they're holding it, because obviously all the royal correspondents are all in the air and flying home at the same time. Usually these things go out at 6 o'clock, which is absolutely hilarious that in a way that the palace still think that anyone, watches the 6 o'clock news on the BBC. But my hunch is that if anything is going to happen, it will be about something about Andrew, something either about Royal Lodge or the title. So we don't really know which it's going to be. Yeah, and I agree with the person who just said they're not into King Charles's dying videos. I completely agree. But yeah, he has, someone else been saying he's been wearing an incredible amount of makeup recently. Look, I've been very frank about this. I think he's done a brilliant job, and I think he's been incredibly brave and done a great deal for cancer, for awareness of the fact that you can live with cancer and carry on doing it. So yeah, let's hope it's nothing to do with the king. Now, the other thing I want to warn you is it may be nothing at all. It may be nothing at all. So we'll we'll see. We will see shortly. We should know in the next few minutes. But even if it's not, there is plenty to talk about, because we had the King and Queen visiting the Vatican City today, this photograph with Pope Leo. And I think that what it's fair to say, I'm going to just override my brilliant producer Ben there, and just to add these. So these are the pictures that the palace is hoping would be enough to grab the world's attention. It's no ordinary photo op, it's fair to say. I mean, it's the first time in half a millennium, well, actually, it's the first time really ever, as far as anyone can tell, that the British monarch and the Pope have prayed together. And the Queen there, in her black mantilla, which the non-Catholic monarchs are required to wear. Tim Teeman is here. He's made it back.
Hi, Tom.
He's made it back. Well, we're waiting anxiously, Tim. I was just explaining to everybody that, you know, these are the pictures.
Hi, everyone.
These are the pictures that the royals are hoping would change the narrative for them today. Yep. And I have to agree, they look absolutely fantastic. The Swiss Guard there, who are the guards of the Vatican, the King, the Queen in her beautiful, very respectful black mantilla, which non-Catholic monarchs, female monarchs, are required to wear when visiting the Vatican. I found out today. And incredible, really, to think that, of course, the Church of England was essentially set up by King Henry VIII so that he could divorce Catherine of Aragon and marry Anne Boleyn. And this caused the massive split with Rome that's endured for 500 years. And today we had not one, but two divorced monarchs. Camilla and Charles have both been divorced and both remarried. And here they were sitting in the Sistine Chapel, rather pointedly, perhaps beneath a fresco of the Last Judgment. So I don't know what anyone made of that, but
it's kind of Camilla's hat really reminds me shape-wise of the hat she wore for her wedding, actually, which was, I think, one of the best things she's ever worn. And the hat, the framing of the face with that design is very, very reminiscent in shape, not color, of her wedding hat to Charles. Yes, good
fashion tips there, Tim. Good fashion observation.
Remember, gotta keep it going. She it's obviously was a very symbolic occasion. Tom, as we're waiting for the breaking news, and I know you've got your eyes on the feed, waiting to reveal what it is. But how, are palace spinners and palace sources seeing this visit as at least temporarily successful in terms of the aim that we discussed yesterday, in terms of displacing, at least for however long it can, the attention on Prince Andrew?
That is the million-dollar question, Tim. And I would argue that it hasn't been very successful in terms of shifting the news narrative or the news agenda, partly because there were new revelations today. So they weren't huge, but there was a revelation that when Andrew's lease was first submitted to the Public Accounts Committee, it was redacted. So it wasn't just the things like the peppercorn were redacted, but things like if demanded, you know, and things like that were redacted, which might have given clues as to what was going on.
Interesting.
So that was kind of the first thing. And then the second thing, the real nightmare for all of this, right, for the palace and all of this, is that if this ends up in Parliament, that seemed to come a step closer today with Geoffrey Clinton Brown, who's the chair of the Public Accounts Committee, saying that their remit was to examine the economy, efficiency and effectiveness of public spending and ensure the taxpayer is receiving best value for money. We will review the response we received to our forthcoming correspondence, he added, which seems to suggest that they are going to write to Andrew and ask Andrew to appear in front of the Public Accounts Committee.
Interesting.
So that's not a welcome development. And then the other thing that kept the Andrew thing in the news, I'm just wondering, Ben, do we have the clip of Cardinal Vincent Nichols speaking I'm just wondering whether Ben can pull that
For
up
the
for
first
us.
time,
Yeah.
these two leaders of churches will pray together. They'll not pray one after the other, they'll pray together. It's a long journey to get over those wounds of the past.
Tom, who is this
He
speaking so
has
people
the
know who it is?
leader, the Supreme Governor of the Church of England.
Who are we watching?
Could we just pause a sec? Thanks, Ben. Yes, so this is Cardinal Vincent Nichols, who is the head of the Catholic Church in the United Kingdom. He's sitting down for an interview with Chris Shipp of ITV, but he hasn't made the crucial comment yet, which is coming up in a moment.
Mhm.
He made similar comments as what he's about to say to the BBC and to Sky News, basically suggesting, hinting very strongly that he believed that Charles should speak to and have a heart-to-heart, essentially, with the Pope about the Andrew situation. So if you recognize this guy, if you're a very, very astute royal watcher, you will recognize this prelate, because he was the person who Charles and Andrew were speaking to outside the Duchess of Kent's funeral when William blanked Andrew. And Charles and Andrew were speaking to the officiating pastor, or the correct word is in the Catholic Church. So let's just play on, Ben, and listen to what he says when he's
needs
on.
to show some moral guidance when it comes to Prince Andrew.
I think they're family issues, essentially. And like any family, we have to deal with the problems of a family as best we can. But then people need to know that the gravity of what's happened is acknowledged, and in that sense can eventually be put to rest.
So that's another sort of interesting intervention there, Tom. It would seem that pressure of hardening and soft kinds are now coming from very many directions for the palace and for Andrew and for movement. And I suppose from your point of view, are we expecting whatever the announcement? We're now 8 minutes past 3, and the announcement hasn't been made yet on the hour, which is unusual for a royal announcement. Normally they are on the hour at some point. Is this announcement that we are expecting, or that is allegedly about to happen, is it Andrew related, essentially?
Yeah, that's what the rumor is, and I hasten to add that half of my WhatsApp contacts are now saying it's happening at 9 p.m. and half are saying it's all a load of rubbish, and everyone's got excited. And how could there be a royal announcement when everyone's been on a plane for the last few hours and flying back from the Vatican? So look, we'll wait and see. But I think what's always interesting about these things, when it gets stirred up that there's going to be an announcement, is it doesn't come out of nowhere. So there is something coming. There is definitely another shoe to fall in this whole Prince Andrew story. Has it happened at 8 o'clock? No. Will it happen at 9 o'clock? Maybe. Will it happen at midnight? Maybe. Will it happen at 11 a.m. tomorrow? Who knows? But so I apologize if I've got people excited that there is going to be an announcement. Possibly there may not be, but welcome. All I can say is welcome to my world. That's all I can basically say. I want to talk a bit more about Cardinal Vincent Nichols, because he also told the BBC, this was quite a telling comment to the BBC, and it just seems to me like a very consistent message. And it seems unimaginable to me that this wouldn't have been at least mentioned to somebody within the King's office. This is what he told the BBC. He's the head of the Catholic Church in the United Kingdom. I have no doubts at all that family difficulties will be in the heart of both the Pope and the King as they place themselves before God and ask for grace and strength to live through all the difficulties that we all have in life. Sky News, he spoke to their royal editor, Rhiannon Mills, and afterwards, Mills, this is what Rhiannon Mills said, this is not what he said. She said, He said, when we come to pray before God, we think about difficult things going on in our lives. And it's not just the king who's got difficulties behind the scenes. It's also Pope Leo. And one of those difficulties is how both institutions confront an issue around historical abuse. So you do wonder whether or not privately the two men may engage in some kind of discussion about that matter as well. So, I thought that was really interesting. I touched base with a few friends of the king earlier. Now, it's been hard to reach people, obviously, because a lot of people are traveling, etc. But what the friend of the king's did tell me was that, he sees himself and understands himself as a man in touch with this is Charles I'm talking about, sees himself and understands himself as a man in touch with his spirituality and his humanity.
Mm-hmm.
And they said to me that it would be unimaginable, was the word that they used, that he wouldn't, in an encounter with a spiritual giant like the Pope, that he wouldn't use the opportunity to seek his advice, to seek his counsel. And I think, to be honest, I think it's probably very useful. Whilst the palace don't want this to be overshadowed by Andrew, I think what the Cardinal was saying there in the clip is very relevant, that they do need to show that they take this seriously. And we've been hearing this message a lot from the palace. We take this seriously. We're not grinning. We're not bearing, we take this very seriously. And I think that they may not be averse to Nichols's hints that the king may have spoken to the Pope about the issue.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a very interesting trip, and a very, religion and all the symbols of religion, which have loomed large in the images. Thanks, Ben. And thanks, Tom, for lining them all up. It's kind of amazing to see statecraft in action, as we're seeing, as we have seen at the Vatican, obviously today. But I do think, as I said yesterday, that to have a trip to see a spiritual leader at a moment like this, when not only the behaviour of certain members of one's high-profile family, but also the judgment being exercised by that institution in relation to that behaviour is so in question. And who knows, that maybe is what the announcement, if it ever comes, is about, some movement or some action on behalf of that institution. I think people will... I've no doubt the palace wanted today to be about pretty pictures and a sense of profundity. And I think it does Charles no harm at all to have a line being sent out into the world that he was seeking advice or seeking the wisdom or counsel of a leader like the Pope. But does a grown person running a global sort of institution that is nicknamed the firm with good reason, at this point in this story, having gone on so long and become by 20 degrees measured more sordid this week than before, does a grown adult with that level of knowledge need that advice at this point? Does that person need that input to know that something isn't quite right here? I don't mean that rudely. I genuinely, and I also again bring in the issue of faith and religion and God and all the stuff that we're being sold in these images. I mean, okay, it's great and important to have belief, but if that belief doesn't have practical application at moments of crisis like this, or if you're saying that you have great morality and a sense of morality and a sense of justice and a sense of all the tenets of religion as a practical application, and this is going on in the background where various things are not being applied by an institution, then one has to question, what does faith mean in practical everyday terms when something is going on so close to home? I'm not deriding somebody's religion. I'm questioning the application of faith if it's being held as keenly and as closely as we're being told. And again, I go back to Virginia Giuffre. Sorry, we haven't mentioned her name today. She is the center of this story, and what she and other victims of trafficking have gone through are the center of this story. And again, we're at a cycle of this story where her name and her experience and her story are being relegated to the levels of silence. And I find that incredibly telling. Again, it becomes a story of men, and it becomes a story of ritual, and it becomes a story of power. And it's very interesting how the media and how people who involve themselves in this story recourse to those much easier things than listening to Virginia. And I just hope, as the story goes on, sorry to repeat myself to everybody watching, I just hope that Virginia's story and voice are not forgotten in whatever does happen with this announcement. And maybe the announcement will reflect some gravity or some grave thinking on the part of the Royal Institution around all these things. One would hope so.
I, for one, don't think that you can ever repeat that message too much, Tim. I think it's a really important message that you've brought to this debate. I think that you are one of the few people who's saying it and who's hammering that point home when Virginia Giuffre's story and her experience is getting lost in the drama of the collapse, the real-time live collapse of Prince Andrew. So I think, and I can see from all the comments on the page that people really agree with you. And I think that another person how I read that comment by Cardinal Nichols, I feel like he agrees with you. He's saying it's very important to show people that you care, that you understand what has happened, that you understand that this is a big deal. And, that you do not shy, if you're going to set yourself up in a moral position, as a position of moral leadership, that you show some moral backbone. That seemed to me what he seemed to be saying. And I think it's interesting because obviously a Catholic cardinal can criticize the King of England in a way that a Church of England cardinal can't, because the king's their boss and their spiritual leader, etc., etc. So I thought it was really, really interesting what he said. And I thought that the veiled criticism of Charles was very pointed, actually. And I think it's quite brave of him to come up and say that. Something else that you said there, Tim, about faith and Charles and his Christianity. And Charles has, for a long time, traded off his Christianity. This has been the reason given why, for example, he could never ban Andrew from going to church because it would be unchristian. Absolutely. Why he had to forgive all these people because it was his Christian principles. So this has been hammered home relentlessly. And yet, on that image that we were looking at before, in Catholic theology, in all religious theology, accountability is an issue, right? The writers of the book of Revelation understood about what accountability is and what it looks like. Now, obviously, we have different ideas these days. But what it really reminds me of in many ways is do you remember when, you will remember, when Diana died and they wouldn't lower the flag to half-mast?
Famously.
And the Sun ran a front page saying, "Show us you care, ma'am." That's where I feel we are with this. I feel like show us you care, sir. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. I also think that's such a wonderful point, Tom. I've been thinking, as you know, we've spoken about in previous episodes about many echoes from the past in this story, and I think you've just pointed to a super profound one. And I think it's not, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think as well as the "Show Us You Care," the literal headline that the Sun ran at that moment in terms of a flag lowering, the other echo from that week, from that moment to this moment, is at moments of moral, practical, reading the national mood. Really, if the royal family is a figurehead or a representative of a nation, not reading that nation in that moment, that is the other very profound echo I feel that harkens back to 1997 and that moment, which is that there's this big moment happening in the nation or in the world, in the country, where the royal family is at the heart of it. Diana's death at that moment. and in this moment, Virginia, the publication of Virginia Giuffre's memoir and everything that's flowing from it for Prince Andrew. And at both moments, there seems to be a profound disconnect or misreading of institution and populace, of institution and national mood. And it's really interesting because I do remember at that time in 1997 that you're referring to, and it's illustrated in the film The Queen, and it's in The Crown as well. So it's in those two things. If people want to watch those moments, I think very well dramatically illustrated, how the palace had to be told in 97 by Blair's government sort of how to respond, and Alistair Campbell or Tony Blair in one of the scenes going, they really don't get it. What is wrong with these people? I'm sorry if I'm paraphrasing wrongly, but that's essentially the substance of that scene. And here it seems an echo, to extend your point about the show us you care, it seems a more profound echo of that, do they not get it sort of similarity from that moment around the flag lowering and around everything else they were doing that week before the intervention of Blair's government in sort of holding their hand to the right way to behave in that moment.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And so there's another really interesting story coming out today, which is part of the reason that I suspect that when this news drops, and whether it comes at 9 p.m. or whether it comes at 11 a.m. tomorrow morning, which used to be the traditional time where they release this kind of stuff, there's another really interesting story in the Telegraph just about a few hours ago, saying that Andrew believes that the king is trying to force him out of Royal Lodge because he wants to give it to the Queen as a dower house after he goes. It's something actually that I reported on last year. I think in 2024, I first did a story about, look, here's the most fantastic. Wow. Now, we haven't been able to get proper footage before now, but here we are.
Is
Ben,
that Royal Lodge?
Genius, has found Royal Lodge for us.
Thank you, Ben.
Look at that. Look at that. 1 peppercorn a year, sir. Yours for 1 peppercorn a year. Look at that. I mean, is that not the most sensational? I mean, it's a palace, really, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Let's talk about this for a minute, Tom. I think, even for people who spend their time watching the royals and reporting on them, it is quite stunning to see it. But it's not, for years, I have seen images more recently in the cycle of the current news of Royal Lodge. But just to see it back isn't what I was expecting. When I first heard about Royal Lodge, I thought it was going to be gravel surrounded by other stuff. This is a very handsome country pile. Very handsome. And look at those gorgeous autumn colors beginning to pepper, some reddening trees there, some reddening trees there. Did it ever surprise you, Tom, to see what it was? Did you have an image in your mind, and did it surprise you to see what it actually looked like in reality?
Well, of course, Tim, it rather reminded me of the planting at your country estate.
I wish. From your mouth to my bank account, babe. Oh my goodness. I wish. But yeah,
it's very striking.
Did it surprise you when you first saw it, or was that the image you had in your head, I guess?
It's very, very striking. They've done a really great job of keeping proper images of Royal Lodge out of the media.
Security reasons or other?
I suppose that's the excuse that's given, but I think probably more for PR reasons.
Right, because we can see
at that.
We can see, I mean, the pictures do not help Prince Andrew in the palace at this point, because that really looks palatial. It's not a great image, as it were, for the royals, I guess, in some way.
So I can tell you a bit about it. So what I do know is that the central room that we're looking at there is the sort of big hall where that's the kind of central area. And then I'm not sure who lives on the left and who lives on the right, but Fergie lives on one side and Andrew lives on the other.
Where's the room?
They do not share a bedroom. I am reliably informed.
Where's the room with the big wall, big TV that spans an entire wall? Where does he play his Call of Duty?
Call of Duty, exactly. Where is he playing Call of Duty? Exactly. Yeah, who knows?
Okay.
But but the thing about Camilla being lined up for Camilla to live there.
Oh, okay.
Is really interesting. So Andrew thinks that Charles wants him out because he wants Camilla to have it after he goes. And the palace are briefing the Telegraph. I suspect it's the palace. I mean, they don't say it is, but it seems to.
Yeah.
Well, actually, they do. They say the king's aides deny the suggestion, and say that Camilla just wants to go back to her little farmhouse in Wiltshire, Ray Mill, that she
Yeah.
still owns and still lives there, and brought her kids up there and stuff. But the fact of the matter is that the Queen Mother lived in Royal Lodge before Andrew. So it was the Queen Mother's home after George VI died. So actually the precedent is that is the home befitting the status of a former queen. And we know that Charles went to quite, should we put this diplomatically? Charles went to quite a lot of trouble to make Camilla queen, is one way of putting it. And a lot of that was about him being respected and her being respected. So I think that from his point of view, he would obviously like his wife to continue to be respected after his death by having this magnificent house. Now, sorry, just to one more thing that I want to say about this whole thing of Camilla moving in there and Andrew staying there. Andrew, I have been told, his game plan is to run out the clock on Charles, as one of his friends rather elegantly put it to me earlier this year or last year. It's safe in the knowledge that when the accession comes with Prince William becoming King William, he'll have more important things on his mind than trying to sort out a lease, and get Andrew out of this property. So very, very interesting line in the Telegraph today saying that the Prince of Wales has made it known he wants the Royal Lodge issue settled before he comes king. Well, I would suggest that has potentially the king, king's people are saying that the Prince of Wales wants it sorted before he becomes king. So I do think that the next brick to, if you had to ask me, what is the next shoe that's going to fall in the Prince Andrew story? And okay, even if we don't get an announcement tonight, what might we expect in the next few days or the next week? I think that it is probably going to be about Royal Lodge. And I think that whether or not they may have to secretly, or quietly make a deal with Andrew, they may have to pay him off to the tune of a couple of million. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. We'll see what happens.
I think, as we were discussing yesterday, Tom.
Laughing person taking the piss out of me, saying there was breaking news announcement of the Royal Variety Show lineup was announced at 8 p.m. Very good, bravo.
I think, as we were discussing yesterday, when it comes to Royal Lodge, that is the piece of red meat that the public and the media have been seeking over the last few days. So if the announcement is around Royal Lodge and Andrew's occupancy of it, that would obviously be that's been the thing that's been exercising most comment and most people who care about this story. I think so. That would seem to be the most obvious thing. Can you just clarify? I think we leapt ahead of. Can you just clarify what the story with Camilla is for the people watching and listening? So, what's the actual news story? Was the news story that Charles wanted Andrew out so Camilla could have it as her bolt hole, basically?
So the Telegraph's got a story. Prince Andrew believes the king is trying to force him out of Royal Lodge because he wants to give it to the Queen. The Prince is refusing to move out, maintains he has a cast iron lease on Royal Lodge, meaning he can't be kicked out. But family friends of Andrew tell the Telegraph that he wants Royal Lodge to become Queen Camilla's base in Windsor should she outlive him. Mentions the thing about the Queen Mother, the precedent of the Queen Mother. Then has the King's aides deny the suggestion, but Andrew is said to be convinced that plans are in place to earmark the property for the Queen.
Okay.
And then, of course, there's some obliging stuff about how Queen Camilla's really very, very mild and modest and would be quite happy living in her 2 up, 2 down in Wiltshire.
Well, Tom, we've spoken about that before. I remember back in the day, you wrote stories about this. We should explain to the readers, I think, that at least until now, and at least until this development that the Telegraph seems to be reporting on, is it right that Camilla sort of likes leaving the palace at certain points to going back? Is it in Wiltshire, this her regular place, and living, putting the toast on, or I don't know, doing whatever she used to do in her regular house? She likes just sort of escaping there as a kind of away from the royal fishbowl. Is that still a thing, or has she sort of grown out of that sort of thing?
Yeah, no, I mean, it is true, and it's been a helpful narrative for the palace as well, you know, because there's always been a desire to paint Camilla as very down to earth with her dogs and her country life and that kind of stuff. So
yeah,
it's always been narrative. It is helped by the fact that it is actually true.
Okay.
They spend quite a lot of time apart, and she particularly likes going to Ray Mill, which is a sort of glorious, well-appointed farmhouse in Wiltshire that she bought with her first husband, Andrew Parker Bowles, famously the model for Jilly Cooper's hero of polo, Rupert Campbell Black, Camilla's first husband. So she does go down there, and she does spend a lot of time there. That is true. So, but I think at the same time, I think that her having Royal Lodge, it wouldn't just be a matter of a place for her to live.
Yeah.
Very good. Look at this. That presumably is Camilla in her garden at Ray Mill. Well, it's certainly the vibe that the palace have long liked to put out about Camilla being a country girl at heart, of modest tastes and that kind of stuff.
We're getting some notes from people pointing out, and you'll be able to know if it's right, Tom. But did she buy Ray Mill after the divorce? She bought it, I think. I'm not sure. Yeah.
Well, I'll have to check that, and if it is, I stand corrected.
Okay. Sorry, everyone. We're just.
This is the day. You see, we're so popular now, Tim, that we can't make any mistakes. And
quite right too. Quite right.
Thank you, Stinko Ginkgo and Rosie's Cottage blog. I mean, with a name like that, you'd suspect that she knows. She knows what she's talking about.
The government. We were discussing just the rise in vote, I guess, with Keir Starmer's intervention. Just government ministers, shadow government ministers, Tory party people, everyone having a point of view on this, and we were talking a bit about precedent for government and the power that government have or don't have. We'd had in the first cycle of this news story, we had Labour ministers going on, I heard them myself, going on to Radio 4 and saying, we're just going to leave the royal family just to sort out their own thing. And then as the public mood and as the news stories just wouldn't stop in those few days, more emboldening voices coming from government, including the Prime Minister himself. We saw, Tony Blair's government, we were just talking about them taking a real leading role in that moment, the week of Diana's death, in guiding the royal family. And there have been moments around, I think, the Queen paying tax, right? I think that's when the government sort of got involved. I remember John Major announcing Charles and Diana's intention to divorce. What is the balance of power between, just for our listeners inside and outside Britain, what is the balance of power between Parliament and the royal family? Can Parliament ever force the royal family to do something? Is the royal family part of legislation? Or are these two power islands that don't really, one can't infringe upon the other? Obviously, the royals were never supposed to know what they think politically, but we know that Charles has very big thoughts politically as well, historically. So what is that relationship practically and legislatively about at the end of a very long day?
So the United Kingdom describes itself as a constitutional monarchy, but it's always quite confusing because the Constitution is not written down. So you can't actually check anything or definitively establish what anything is, except by looking at precedent. So all the stuff that you just talked about, that basically is a living evolution of the Constitution, of what Parliament can or can't do. Ultimately, the resolution that we seem to have got to is that the royal family do have to do essentially what the government tell them to do. And you see this occasionally come out from behind the shadows, as it were.
Yeah.
One quite recent example of it was when King Charles wanted to go to the COP conference and was told not to go by Liz Truss, who was the very brief prime minister who was last prime minister of Queen Elizabeth II. Yeah. And so Charles wanted, obviously, to go to the COP conference, but Liz
briefly
Truss,
what that conference was, Tom. Sorry to interrupt.
COP is the environmental conference, which is about to kick off again next month, and William's Earthshot, which is another thing that we're going to have to talk about another night, is part of it. But so Charles really wanted to go to this big environmental conference. I think it was in Brazil that year. And someone's going to correct me right now. Charles really wanted to go to this big environmental conference, and he's always made a big thing about the environment being his thing, being close to his heart. All it's well known how passionate Charles is about the environment. Well, Liz Truss was coming into power with this very, very right-wing agenda that was, net zero is all a load of rubbish. It was the equivalent of drill, baby, drill, right? Yeah. And she did not want Charles to go. And she just said to him, you can't go. And that's the end of it. So, I mean, that gives you quite a clear indication of the power that Parliament does have over the royal family. So they do have significant power. And that's why this is a very dangerous moment for the royal family, and it is also humiliating for the royal family if this whole thing ends up in an inquiry on the floor of the House of Commons. It's going to be very embarrassing, and Parliament is His Majesty's government, but actually the relationship is more complex and more difficult than that. So it's not simply the case that Parliament can tell individuals what to do or how to behave within the royal family. But when it comes to matters of state, they definitively can. And when it comes to these other matters, such as, should you divorce your wife, they're involved. They are involved. And of course, when Queen Elizabeth was dying, on the days that she was dying, that very famous moment where the note was passed in the Houses of Parliament to the government, and the first announcements about her being unwell, seriously unwell, were made in the Houses of Parliament. So the link is hard to exactly define, but I think what has definitely never happened before is the humiliation of a member of the royal family being grilled in front of the Public Accounts Committee. I mean, it's almost unthinkable. But I mean, at this stage, I think there's such demand for something to happen. I think there's such demand for something to happen and I think Parliament ultimately, if Parliament doesn't express the will of the people, however late it may be getting to it, or however much it may muddle it, or that kind of thing. Ultimately, I think the British Parliament has not been bad over the years about ultimately expressing the will of the British people. I do genuinely think that. I mean, it's a crazy system. It's old-fashioned. It's all of those things. But ultimately, it seems to kind of get there in the end. But now they're trying to catch up, is what it seems to me. They're trying to reflect the opinion of the people. So you saw Keir Starmer at Prime Minister's Questions yesterday saying that, you know, he would agree that this should be looked at by Parliament, which is a really a big departure. You know, usually if the Prime Minister's asked anything about the royal family, he'll just say that's a matter for the royal family, which is what they did try to say originally. But I think that the pressure is now intense on Parliament to do something.
I suppose the question is, the blunt question is, can the British Parliament force the royal family's hand at all when it comes to Prince Andrew? If public sentiment, or if it is felt that the royal family isn't keeping its own house in order, as it were, does the British Parliament have legislative and legal recourse to make Prince Andrew answerable? Do the British police authorities, do any legal authorities have the opportunity, have the latitude to bring to bear on Prince Andrew / the royal family if it's felt that there is a case to answer? So do any of those institutions, both Parliament and the British legal system, do they have recourse to make the royal family / Prince Andrew accountable or not?
Yes, they do. Parliament can summon Andrew to the Public Accounts Committee, which is what looks like is going to be the first thing that is going to happen. The police can certainly investigate Andrew, and indeed have said that they are investigating him over the allegation that he illegally handed Virginia Giuffre's personal information to his bodyguard and told him to get the police to act as his personal gumshoes and dig up dirt on her to discredit her. So yes, there is stuff they can do. What they can't do is they can't strip Andrew of the title of prince, because that is in the gift of the monarch. But what they can do is they can strip Andrew of his dukedom, because as we know, Andrew has agreed to stop using the title, but he is still legally the Duke of York. So, and I think that is going to happen. And I do wonder whether that might be the announcement that is brewing ether tonight, and if it doesn't happen tonight, I wonder if it'll happen tomorrow.
Interesting, Tom. So either Royal Lodge, as you said a few minutes ago, or stripping of a title, or bonanza of both, or one or the other type of thing?
Well, I was definitely hearing that the government was involved in whatever was happening, and it seems to me that Royal Lodge is just a private matter. Okay. You know, like if the government is involved, and if Westminster is involved, then it seems more likely that it's to do with the stripping of the title. I would think, and that seems to me logically the next place to go.
Yes, absolutely.
I think it can be. I think it can be done. So look, someone's saying here, please stop the BS. Letters patent can be drawn up and remove all titles and HRH, including prince. Yeah, absolutely. They can be drawn up, but letters patent are issued by the monarch. That's the point that I'm making, and that's the in terms of the prince and the HRH bit. But the duke bit could be removed through the Deprivations of Titles Act, and there are early day motions now before Parliament to have the issue advanced. So that is within Parliament's gift to do it. And I think that there is such pressure now from the country. Andrew is phenomenally unpopular. I mean, his ratings are, they used to be hovering in the sort of high single figures. It's hard to imagine now that you would find more than 2 or 3 people in 100 who would say they approve of Prince Andrew, and probably would only be doing so to annoy the pollsters. But he is so unpopular. And the Virginia Giuffre memoir, the Virginia Giuffre revelations that have piled on. I think that Parliament has a responsibility now to reflect the will and the settled desire of the British people that this man is no longer honoured by our society. I just don't think that there's really any question about that, and I think that it has to be done. And I do agree that the government does not want a debate on this on the floor. They do not want MPs speaking under parliamentary privilege, making wild allegations that go down into Hansard, the official report of the proceedings in the House of Commons. So this is a moment of great peril for the royal family. Make no mistake about it. And it's a moment of great peril because they have mishandled this. They have swept it under the carpet. They've hoped it would go away. It hasn't gone away. It's got worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. And it's so bad now that this, what should have actually been the biggest moment of Charles's reign so far, this visit to the Pope, it should have been the biggest moment of his reign. This is the thing that Charles would have been hoping would lead his obituary. Do you know what I mean? He was the first king since Henry VIII to, do you know what I mean? This is, there is no more Prince Charles-y moment than this. This is the essence of King Charles.
Yeah.
I am the builder of bridges. I am the convener. I am the person who brings together. And it has been completely overshadowed by this discussion about Andrew and the failure to deal with him.
Tom, has there been, and I ask this almost from a sort of contrarian, well, not contrarian, but sort of, I just wonder really in the back of my own mind. I haven't seen anything along these lines at all myself, but we were talking in yesterday's broadcast about Prince Andrew's friends and these shooting weekends set to begin again. And people from within that class of people, very happy to continue being seen with him and shooting with him and carrying on as normal, and them not being affected by this latest set of stories and whatever is about to unfold from the palace today. In the British, either in the Telegraph or in other corners of establishment voices, over the last, let's see, it feels like we've been talking about this for months, but it's only been just under a week. In the last week, have there been any voices at all in defense of Prince Andrew in the public square? And if so, what grounds of a defense of Prince Andrew have there been? I'm just wondering, there have been, obviously, we've been talking a lot about the voices of criticism and the rising tide of criticism that is now everywhere. And I'm just interested if there have been any voices speaking up in favor of Prince Andrew, and if so, how have those voices chosen to frame their arguments, if at all?
Yeah, well, I'm going to give our producer a job here because there was a story in the Telegraph by a writer called Annabelle Denham, I think. So see if you can find that, Ben, who wrote a piece saying that, it was all terribly unfair and that Andrew should be allowed to get on with his life and that it was all grossly unfair. I mean, it was interesting. I mean, I read through some of the comments afterwards and, there's a handful of people who they're the same kind of people who say, but this country lost its mind when it all went mad, mourning Diana.
Very familiar conservative voices, essentially.
very, very familiar conservative voices.
Yeah.
Saying, but there is a strain of thought amongst some of the upper classes, particularly some of Andrew's tribe, even people who know him don't particularly like him, right? He's not like a massively popular guy. Yeah. But I think there is some people that have, as a point of principle, kind of, they kind of say, this is just another example of the mob baying for somebody's blood, and it's a witch hunt, and it's unfair because he can't speak up, he can't defend himself. Well, he did, he tried, it was a massive failure.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that they're onto a hiding to nothing.
Yeah.
But I think that privately, actually, I think that the shooting friends, the sort of old friends, I think, who've always known what Andrew was like and always known, you know, what he was like. They are standing by him. And I, you know, there's no sympathy for Andrew. No one's going to publicly stand up and say, you know, Andrew's been horribly mistreated. Like, of course they're not. And most people, I think, particularly as we keep saying, particularly with the Giuffre memoir coming out, are really horrified by what he's doing and don't really have many doubts. And, you know, now that it's been proved that he lied about his relationship with Epstein, and I think that people believe now clearly that, you know, that he was lying when he said he couldn't sweat, that he was lying when he said that he was at Pizza Express, and that he was lying when he said he'd never met Virginia Giuffre in his life. I think that's pretty well received opinion. But yeah, so there are some voices who are trying to make that argument of like it's not fair, but arguably are they just doing it to attract attention? You know, does the Telegraph just want to run something that's a little bit controversial? I don't know. I don't think anyone seriously can defend Andrew at this stage. Do you?
No, I mean, it's just fascinating sometimes to know how the media cycle works. And I was wondering if by day 5 they were like, oh, can we get a pro Andrew editorial in here somehow, type of thing, and see if it would fly. But as you say, and we should, I mean, we haven't said it in this 50 minutes so far, and we should say that Andrew still vigorously denies all the accusations made against him. I'm also fascinated, Tom. There are 2 royal figures currently missing from this story, and I, as you know, I wrote about it myself. You used to find it very funny. I'm always interested when the royal figures, who I have a nerdish and sort of ongoing fascination with, do not figure in a story and seemingly are nowhere to be seen when a big story breaks around their relations. So for a few minutes, please, with this story still not breaking and hopefully still hoping to engage people watching and listening to us.
Yeah.
What do our favorites, Princess Anne, Prince Edward and Sophie, what do they all think about this backstage? If they have any thoughts about this at all, what are their... Princess Anne and Prince Edward are respectively Prince Andrew's sister and brother. We know what other key royals think about this stuff, but we never hear about them. Do we have any intel at all, or do they have no view, and even their sources have no view on their no view?
No, Anne is pretty clear that she's aghast at the whole debacle. She considers Andrew a embarrassment at best and a disgrace at worst. Anne is you know, she's a robust and forthright person, but she would never say anything that would damage the family or bring the monarchy into disrepute.
Family first.
Yeah, so she would never criticize him openly or publicly, but she is aghast at anyone who brings the family's name, you know, into drags the name down.
Yeah,
Edward is a slightly different kettle of fish. Edward is, you know, he's not a particularly intelligent man. Edward, he's perfectly nice, and he's a bit of a sort of Tim nice but dim, you know.
Thanks for saying that.
Tim, I can't believe I just said that. I can't believe I just said that. There used to be a character called Tim Nice but Dim in Harry.
He wasn't. Although,
sorry, you've probably gone 20 years without hearing that.
I'm sure he'd love to insult me, but he actually wasn't insulting me just then. There was indeed a British TV character called that, but that did make me laugh out loud. It's really sweet. It's very funny. But yeah,
that's awful. That's awful. Forgive me.
I think listeners and watchers will take that as a Freudian slip. He's been wanting to say that for a while, I
think. Prince Edward is not, you know, look, he's a perfectly nice guy, but you can see it even when he's being interviewed. He's a bit goofy. He's a bit of a sort of upper-class twit in some ways, but he's always been the person who's been made to sit next to Andrew. Whenever in the past 5 years, I've always noticed whenever there's a you know, a car ride or a dinner or anything or a church service, it's always Edward and Sophie. You have to sit next to them, and I do think it's a bit mean. No, sorry, Ben, wrong person there. Get rid of him.
Not sure who that is.
Well done. It's good to see not everybody is obsessed by it.
But there is another interesting dynamic with Edward, right? And correct me if I'm wrong, but since the ascent of Charles, as it were, and Charles assuming the kingship, we've been reading a lot, and we've written about it at the Beast as well. At least we did back in the day. That Edward and Sophie were widely being seen in very good terms, and they'd really, even when the Queen was alive, the Queen had a big soft spot for Sophie and was doing engagements with her, I think, at some point.
Yeah.
So they'd begun this kind of this mini journey into the nucleus, the power nucleus of the family. Do they still occupy a soft and very quietly powerful position at the heart of the family, or not under Charles?
Yeah, I think that I'm getting the WhatsApp's going a bit crazy. Sounds like Andrew might be Andrew related. Sounds like a Royal. I think it is a Royal Lodge thing. Whether it's going to happen at 9, we don't know. Just coming up to the 9 o'clock hour. Ben, maybe you could just keep an eye on the news channels for us and let us know if anything happens. Maybe if anything happens, Ben, stick it on a ticker across the bottom if you beat us to it. Sounds like Andrew could be on the move. That will be very, very interesting if this does finally happen.
Royal Lodge related, you're hearing, Tom?
Royal Lodge related. So Royal Lodge, Prince Andrew took over the lease of Royal Lodge on the death of the Queen Mother. The Queen Mother had lived there after the death of her husband, King George VI, Queen Elizabeth's parents. He took over the lease. It has been revealed in the last few days that Andrew, we'd all been led to believe that he was paying some sort of roughly commercial rent for the place. It has now been revealed that he has been paying nothing. He's been paying 1 peppercorn per year, actually, to be exact. And the whispers that I'm getting, and I have to hesitate, they are still whispers. This is not official. Is that Andrew is indeed going to be on the move, as one of my sources is telling me. So
let's be very careful in the reporting until it's been confirmed.
Yes, okay? Yes. Let's wait. You're right, Tim. You see, this is why we need Tim here. Nothing is confirmed yet, but let's just say it's very clear that there has been a lot of pressure on Andrew to move out of Royal Lodge. Questions have been asked in Parliament about it, and all of this was driven up and amplified when it was revealed that Andrew has not paid rent on Royal Lodge for 22 years, and that his lease specified that the annual rent was, and I quote, 1 peppercorn if demanded.
And Tom, somebody from the USA is just asking on the things here, what does that mean? Is that literally a peppercorn? Can you just describe what that means, please?
Yes. So in order for a contract to be legal under some archaic rule, a payment has to be made for a service for a contract to be legal. So this is essentially a feudal arrangement that Andrew has been enjoying of his, so-called peppercorn rent.
Yeah.
So let's see what happens. So could be anything happening any moment now, and I'm sure everybody's keeping an eye on it. To be honest, it's quite late now, 9 o'clock in the evening. They've all been at the Vatican all day.
It's still perfectly timed. What time is the BBC?
9 o'clock news.
9 o'clock news, right? Or is it 10 o'clock or 9 o'clock in Britain these days?
Well, I think there's a 9 o'clock, isn't there?
Right.
I think the ITV is 10 o'clock. I do find it kind of brilliantly hilarious that the Palace still thinks that the 9 o'clock news matters.
I mean, it kind of. I mean,
like, what planet are you on, guys? It's like, oh my god, you're still like doing stuff for the 6 o'clock news.
As we're keeping an eye on the ticker, and Tom and Ben will be doing so, we can talk briefly about the Palace have been very keen in recent years. And Tom, interrupt me if you see something breaking.
Yeah.
But to break news at particular times. The Queen's death was broken to the world at a very particular moment, and for a period of time, 6 p.m. British time to hit the 6 o'clock news was a thing, and then that went, I think last week, Tom, to 7 o'clock while the various power factions within the Palace tried to sort out who was going to say what under whose name. Is that right? And that accounted for a delay of a notional hour in that announcement.
Yeah, exactly. So the statement that came out just a week ago saying that Andrew would stop using his title, that was originally, we were all told it was coming at 6 p.m. and then it didn't come till 7 p.m. And I'm told that's because everybody was screaming at each other in the Palace, trying to figure out the information and trying to figure out the wording. Sorry, not the information, the wording of what it was going to be. And I think that William was closely involved in it, and William was unhappy about the defiant tone of Andrew's statement. He was unhappy about the fact that the statement was issued under the aegis of Buckingham Palace. So so that pushed it back to 7 p.m. In fact, in the old days, it used to be 11 a.m., which was much more civilized. But I think they realized that was maybe no good for America. But I would say if it doesn't happen now, and I don't think we're there, I'm not seeing anything happening.
Yeah, so Tom, is that anything at all? Nothing's coming in from the Palace at all? Because normally it would come on the hour, wouldn't it?
Yeah. So I am probably gonna suspect that it'll be closer to it'll either be midnight tonight, embargoed for the papers, or it'll be 11 a.m. tomorrow, or maybe there's nothing at all, and maybe it is a classic example of a Fleet Street a rumor that has gone round.
Well, it's actually really important. It's really important to have the discussion that we've had this afternoon, because there is so much happening, and there was so much to say, I think, about King Charles's trip to see the Pope and the context of Prince Andrew that it was happening within, and the rolling story that is around Andrew. I think we'll just assure everyone who is listening and watching to us, kind of talk about the issues that the two sort of ongoing, Charles in Italy and the Prince Andrew, what happens next, stories that today has been about. If things do move appreciably on, my time this afternoon, your time there this evening, and if something cooks up, we will leap back on here and be here as quickly and as promptly as we can. And if not, you'll see us tomorrow cogitating on whatever has taken place. As Tom says, sometimes there can be a sort of a furious pre-pile on to something that eventually doesn't exactly happen according to the clock that people were expecting. Is that right, Tom?
Yeah, and I've got to say, I did feel that story in the Telegraph felt like very much a softening up exercise.
Oh, okay.
Or he's on the move. So we'll see what happens. Right, everybody's off to watch Traitors in the UK, so we'll leave you to it. I think it's 9:04. I'm not seeing anything. There's no announcement coming in. Oh, the music is playing. That's it.